So Matt, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So good to be here. I'm really honored to join you, Bethany. So thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. We love having you, and would love to just kick off this session and ask you to introduce yourself. Actually, just tell us a little bit about your background. The folks on the line have all read your bio, but would love to just hear more about your career and your personal history.
Sure. No, thank you. So let's see where to start. I am the father of two wonderful daughters, married to my wife of lots of years now. I live in the Bay Area now, but originally grew up in the Midwest in Indiana, and my whole family is still back there, and have been jumped around the country until I finally found my way here. I've spent my entire career in software and technology. So I was a mechanical engineer by training, but one of the best things about the college internship I did was it taught me that I didn't really want to be a mechanical engineer, and I found this whole computer software thing really interesting. So I started my career in the enterprise software space, and then kind of mid-career shifted into more of the consumer products and consumer technology space. As you mentioned, I spent a little over, over a decade, 12 years at Google, where I had an opportunity to work on some really fun products that hopefully many of you have used. And then after doing that for a number of years, worked at YouTube, and actually had the experience of being able to live abroad for 3 years, running the YouTube business in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which was just a fabulous growth experience for me. And then joined Quizlet just about a little short of 5 years ago now.
Well, thank you for bringing us through some of that history. And I want to just dive in a little bit further here, because you led product management at YouTube, founded Google Apps. You're actually behind the development of a lot of Google products that, as you very modestly mentioned, we might have used at one point. We're probably all using many of those every day. And when the opportunity to join Quizlet as CEO came up, you actually could have very comfortably ridden off into the sunset, put your feet up, sat by the pool mat, and instead you dove into a startup. And so I'd love to just kind of understand the sort of thinking behind it, what drew you to that experience after helping to build and working at one of the biggest and most well-recognized companies in the world, and then to go back to a startup phase. What was that like for you? What were you thinking about?
Yeah, what was I thinking? No. No, so first of all, I definitely want to give credit where credit is due. A lot, all of those accomplishments and things that I had the absolute honor and privilege of being a part of at Google, and YouTube, it takes a village, right? So I don't by any means take any of the credit for all of those successes. It really, is a great team. But to your question in particular, it's interesting. I wasn't actively looking when Quizlet found me, and I long believed, I'd say, a life philosophy. Sometimes it's better to be lucky and you put yourself in the situation. But then timing and luck matter. So I was actually working at YouTube, and I was probably having some of the most fun I had ever had, kind of lifetime to date in my career. I was working on YouTube subscription products. So what became, I think we launched as YouTube Red, what became YouTube Premium, but my team was also working on what launched as YouTube TV, which is still probably one of my favorite products that I've ever had the opportunity to help build. And I got, like I'm sure many of you, I got a headhunter call. I got an executive recruiter call. And I only even gave it a second look because it was in the field of education and learning. And the ed tech space, or the education space, is a space that I've long been interested in. In the early days of Google Apps, we actually started in the education space. The first version of apps that launched was Google Apps for Education. So because it was education, I decided to take a second look. And back to timing being everything, I said to the recruiter, I can meet for coffee next Wednesday at 9 a.m. And it happened to be right the day before Thanksgiving. Had he said, no, I'm busy or I'm traveling, I probably wouldn't have given it another thought and just kind of moved on. But he was available. And so long story short, after a number of conversations, I would go into every one of those conversations as I met, first with him and then folks on the Quizlet team of, well, I probably won't do this. This probably isn't right for me, but let's just see. And I'd always walk out going, that's really interesting. Like there's something really, really special here. And I eventually got to the point where I couldn't not go do this. To me, kind of as you alluded to, Bethany, the risk would be not doing it, right? The risk would be staying in a comfortable role where I was having a great time and surrounded by amazing colleagues, but not really pushing myself. And I ultimately decided if I wasn't good at this or if I didn't like the job, there was always, I could go back to that place of comfort or many places like it. But the risk was actually not taking that opportunity and taking that challenge and diving in, as you said. So I did. And, here we are 4.5 years later, and I haven't looked back.
Well, I love that explanation, Matt. And one of my longtime mentors is actually a professor at Stanford. His name is Irv Grossbeck. Have you ever come across him?
Yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that Irv says a lot, he's paraphrasing someone else. I've shared this with BreakLiners before, and I forget the person who originally said it, but it's something like regret for what we've done can be tempered by time. Regret for what we've never done is inconsolable. And it's really interesting to hear that was a factor in your decision-making with joining Quizlet.
No, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I just read a quote, I think it was from an interview with Jeff Bezos, who basically said a similar thing of like the regrets. It doesn't have many regrets in life. And the ones he does are things that he didn't go try, right?
Yeah.
He didn't go do. So.
Well, good for you. So as I think about the people that we've been lucky enough to hear from as part of the speaker series, it's folks like Kevin Systrom, who founded Instagram. And then just a week or two ago, we heard from Justin Osofsky, who's now the COO of Instagram, but wasn't part of the founding team.
Right.
And it's really different if you start the company and build the company versus come in as a CEO when there's this sort of existing, organism that's already in place and you're trying to take it to the next level. I'm really, really interested in hearing about this experience that you had of stepping into Quizlet as it was 4.5 years ago. What were you thinking about in terms of your responsibility to kind of continue to grow it and, how you hit the ground running, how that experience, that transition felt to you at the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was definitely something that I was very attuned to. And so I actually spent, I first met with Quizlet in, November of 2015. I actually didn't sign on and didn't start until May of the following year. So I actually spent a fair bit of time, through that process. And one of the most important things to me prior to accepting the role or to joining was making sure that I really understood kind of what the company was truly about, what the essence of the company was about, what the founders were looking for, and making sure I was the right fit for that, right? Because if those expectations are misaligned, like no one's going to be happy. And so I think that was really, even prior to sort of signing on and accepting the challenge, was making sure I really went in very clear-eyed with what the challenge and the opportunity was. When I started, my mindset was very much in listening mode, right? And there's a great book, I think it's called The First 100 Days, which is about transition and change. And I read it every time I change jobs. I think I've read it, 3 or 4 times now. But so it's very much about listening and understanding, because you're absolutely right. It didn't feel like mine. I felt like I'm very much an outsider coming in, and the Quizlet team was amazing, and the culture was so welcoming, and they embraced me, from day one. But I very much felt like, hey, my responsibility here is to shepherd something that I didn't build. And so now I took a lot of comfort in that. I felt like my skills and experiences were highly aligned with what the company needed to kind of take it to the next level, right? It's a product-driven organization. I've spent a lot of my career in product. It's a consumer, direct-to-consumer product, of which I'd spent a number of years. It's a user-generated platform. YouTube happens to be a decent-sized user-generated platform. So there was strong alignment. So I had a confidence that I was kind of the right fit for the role. But there was definitely, I'll say it, candidly, a hesitancy of mine of like, it didn't it didn't feel like mine. And then an interesting thing happened over time as I built up the team. You know, when I joined, we were probably 30 people, give or take. You know, one of the challenges or opportunities I had was building out the leadership team and bringing in some, you know, some experience from industry and whatnot to augment the amazing talent that we had there already. And over time, as that process unfolded, I got naturally more and more comfortable to now where, you know, I still don't take credit or feel like I founded the company, but I do very much feel like it's my own. And I feel like it's my responsibility, much in the way, I've never founded anything, but much in the way I would assume a founder feels. And there's probably still some slight differences, but that evolution happened over, you know, over a number of years. Oh, I lost your audio. Oh,
No, that was me. Even with all this Zooming, Matt, I still sometimes forget I'm on mute. One of the things that's really interesting about Quizlet is for a Silicon Valley startup, it's actually grown at a reasonable pace for a while, and then now it's really taking off. Before I get into this question, Matt, can you bring us up to today in terms of size and scale? For example, Quizlet recently had $1 billion valuation, 50 million monthly users. I mean, when you took over, we're talking about a 30-person company, and now this company is having world-changing impact, which is so fascinating. I'd love to just hear from you. How do you encapsulate Quizlet and the impact it's having today?
Yeah, it's exciting. It's what, you know, it's what does get us all, I think, out of bed every morning is you know, we're very focused on our mission, which is helping people learn, you know, and helping people practice and master whatever it is they're trying to learn. So yeah, you mentioned some of the key numbers. We're now north of 50 million monthly active users. You know, to give you some perspective, in the US, you know, on the order of 2/3 of all US high school students and over half of US college students use Quizlet on a regular basis. You know, we're used in over 130 countries. The product's available and accessible in 19 languages, I think. You know, employee-wise, like I said, we were about 30 people, give or take, when I started. I think we've just crossed the 250 mark. So still not big by any stretch, but definitely scaled from when I joined. So, you know, the impact and the opportunity we have is pretty massive. You know, and I think probably the best part about the business and the company is that as we succeed in achieving our mission, which is helping more and more people learn, the business naturally grows as well. So the economic incentives are aligned, and we can, you know, we can both do well financially and do good for the world, which is wonderful.
And Matt, Quizlet recently raised a Series C.
That's right.
And which is when the company earned the $1 billion valuation. Will you talk to us about what that funding means for Quizlet? How are you guys going to invest it? Where are you expecting to build out?
Yeah, so we raised our Series C round, I guess in April. So amidst a global pandemic and a stock market crash, and so that was, you know, there were some. I have more gray hair than I did a few months ago, but luckily it all successfully turned out. You know, I think it's funny. I've been using the analogy of oftentimes in Silicon Valley parlance, as you know, once you're $1 billion, you know, private company, you're called a unicorn, and that phrase or that analogy has been used for 7 or 8 years. Of one of the venture capitalists, Eileen Lee, kind of came up with it, and the idea behind it was the rarity of it, right? It was a very rare thing. So a unicorn to be $1 billion company, a private company. I actually like, there's another venture capitalist and author, Alex Lazaro, who chose a different mascot, if you will, and he talks about it as a camel. And I prefer that one because I actually think it's more fitting to Quizlet's story. So, you know, and what are the differences between unicorns and camels? Well, first of all, camels are real and unicorns are fictitious, obviously. But probably more important to the analogy is, you know, when you think about a camel, like what do we immediately picture, right? They can go long stretches in the desert in very harsh environments without food or water. And so, you know, when we apply that to a company, they can be very capital efficient. They can make very important, but they can still function really well and make progress on their journey. Something I didn't know until I learned about this analogy was camels are like the fastest drinking animal on the planet. So when they do find water, they can guzzle water faster than anything else on the planet. And they can also sprint. Who knows? They can actually sprint really fast. So they can run for long distances really fast. And so when we think about the analogy to us, we like that camel analogy because, as you said, we for a long period of time, for a decade, Quizlet went without venture funding, was very cash efficient, and really built a great product with a maniacal focus on users and really, drove that organic growth. And as we've started to take venture capital money, we haven't changed that philosophy at all. So we're still very capital efficient. We focus on a business model where the unit economics make sense. And we continue to have just a maniacal focus on the users that we're serving, the learners, the students that are trying to learn and how to help them. Now, the nice thing is with the injection of additional venture capital, that allows us to make some additional bets, but still following those same principles. So, we're not going out and throwing wild parties or creating lavish perks, but really thinking about, as we think about how to accelerate the business over the next 3 to 5 years, and it's things like, are there projects where we can invest a little bit ahead of the curve, and as the business model catches up, or are there opportunities potentially for acquisitions in the space as we're looking at how we can serve our users better. So.
Well, I'm really interested in that model, particularly coming from Silicon Valley, because I think, Matt, and you might have seen this as well, there's almost an over-reliance on really easy access to venture capital before you know if you have a business or not.
That's right.
And to see that Quizlet went 10 years, building and the blood, sweat, and tears it takes to get there, before you were ready to really hit the gas with the venture capital, I think is really interesting. It was a really interesting choice.
Well, and I think it sets I credit obviously the founders and the work that they did and the team before me, but I think it also sets a tone and a mindset about how you're going to, the culture of the company, how you're going to grow. What I always tell founders and entrepreneurs when I talk with them is you don't have to have a functioning business model that's ROI positive on day one, but you should absolutely think about what that's going to be, right? And I think those two oftentimes get confused. And to your point, eventually, whether it's an economic downturn or a fickle market or whatever the case may be, if the venture dollars run out and you don't have a sustainable business, you can't achieve your mission, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've really focused on sustainable growth so that we can continue to invest in and ultimately achieve our mission of helping people learn.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out, again, Matt was really modest about their ability to raise a significant round of funding in April, like truly the toughest market in 100 years or something to raise money. So it points to how robust Quizlet's business model is and growth and all the fundamentals there, which I think is really interesting, Matt, and good for you and your team. That's great.
Thank you.
So just shifting gears a little bit, talking more about the pandemic, and obviously that hit us in the US in very real terms in March, although it was bubbling, of course, before that. But at the very beginning of the pandemic, Quizlet stepped up and provided free remote learning resources to teachers and students. Can you talk about the impact that had on educators and anything that Quizlet has learned as a result? This is a company that's been very disciplined about its business model. And then here you are stepping up when there's a crisis and giving away these tools for free.
Yeah, no, so it was an easy decision, I'll say, because again, if you're focused on the mission, then, short-term things that you need to do that can help, it was a very easy decision as a result. Also say, the nature of our business model. So the vast majority of people can use Quizlet's core products for free. So we're actually starting in a very good place. We have accessibility of our products to people is sort of a core, a core principle or a core ideal of ours. That we want to make great, high quality learning tools available as broadly, as widely as possible. So we're starting from a place where that's already kind of, I'd say, in the company's DNA. And then on top of that, what we did and what you're alluding to is we get used by, our primary user is students, obviously, people learning things. And that can be everybody from, middle school or high school, college, lifelong learner, et cetera. But teachers, and especially high school teachers, middle school and high school teachers, are a key constituency on our platform. I think of them more as almost a partner of ours. Like we both have the same goal, which is to help their students learn. And so teachers embrace and leverage Quizlet in their classroom and to provide that, to sort of evangelize it and provide it to their students to help them learn. So one of our subscription products that we offer is a paid teacher version. So teachers can also use this for free, but then we have a subscription version which gives them some additional features and conveniences. And we said, hey, if that can help teachers in this, in this time of need, when suddenly everyone was forced to think about online and remote learning, it was, like I said, it was just sort of a no-brainer in terms of providing access to that capability to teachers. And the results were tremendous. I mean, we saw in just a few days, we saw, I think, over 100,000 additional teachers sign up to Quizlet. When internet, as I mentioned, we're a global company in terms of our user base, but still heavily concentrated in the US. And we saw just massive growth outside of the US. So, in our top 50 non-US countries, I think we saw somewhere between 200 and 400% user growth in each of those markets. And much of that was assisted by or guided by teachers. So, like I said, it probably made actually really good business sense for us, but we did it because it was the right thing to do in terms of achieving our mission.
Bethany, you're on mute again.
I know, team. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says, "Sorry, I was on mute."
we had another one this morning that says "Unstoppable." I also like that one.
Nice.
So I love this story so much because it's an example of doing the thing that's clearly the right thing in the moment, and it turns out it's also great for your business. I love it when those results coincide like that, and would love to see that happen more often. So it's really wonderful that was the outcome. Can you talk to us a little bit, Matt? I mean, you all are a global company. You must see differences in teaching and learning across the board. Are there any highlights in that respect that would be interesting to share with this audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. We had the same question. So as the pandemic was unfolding in the spring, and we were, given the scale that we have, we can start to dig into our data and see what's happening, kind of on a geography, a country level. We can start to cut it by kind of types of users, age of users, et cetera. And one of the things we very quickly noticed, what were these differences in kind of usage patterns where, Poland, I think, was an example for whatever reason, where we saw this just shoot through the roof, like, multiple 100% year-on-year user growth, just, and crazy growth. Whereas in the US, we actually saw some fall off as, sort of things were chaotic. And, as you know, in the US, the K through 12 school system is very distributed. Decisions are made at the very local level. In some countries around the world, they're the opposite, which is they're very top-down driven. And so, if Quizlet was prescribed by the Ministry of Education, then suddenly everyone was using us the next day. And so there was some fascinating, we actually released a report, the state of global learning or something. It's on our blog. You can check out the data report where we dug in and looked at the data, and we saw some interesting, subject level differences where, certain subjects like math, we actually saw increase in usage, whereas some other subjects we saw a decrease. I'd say probably the most important and unfortunate reality that we saw very clearly in the data is the digital divide, or what's being referred to more and more as the homework divide here in the US, where we cross-referenced our data with zip code data and socioeconomic characteristics, and saw people in higher socioeconomic classes appear to do more online learning, more access to to education, because better access to devices, a more conducive home environment to study in, high-speed internet, whereas people in lower socioeconomic classes struggled more, were forced to mobile devices versus laptops, those types of things. So, I think an interesting thing in the US, we've made tremendous headway in the last decade in getting high-speed connectivity into schools, and that is there's an initiative called the Education Superhighway, where they've basically completed, like most all K through 12 schools have access to high-speed internet. But now what we're seeing because of the pandemic is that hasn't crossed the gap into the home environment, and it's just so critical now more than ever that students learning have access to digital tools and the internet to continue learning. So we got to see a lot of those types of things firsthand by being able to sort of interrogate this large amount of data that we have because of our global usage.
That is fascinating, Matt. And is Quizlet doing anything around offline learning, given the digital divide, so that some of these kids from underprivileged backgrounds can still access education?
We are, and that's another example of so if you're using, we're obviously web app and also mobile native applications, and our mobile applications have offline capabilities. And that's an area where historically that's actually been a paid feature of ours. It's part of one of the subscription packages, and we're moving that in front of the paywall so that anybody who needs access to offline can have it for exactly that reason. I mean, there's literally, you've probably seen some of the stories about students sitting in parking lots, in front of their school, or at a McDonald's, so that they can get internet so that they can study.
Yes, Matt, Glotzbach, and team. I am so supportive of these decisions. Do it. I love it. So, Matt, we, as you and I were talking about just before we joined, I had the pleasure of interviewing a former Google colleague just before this, and my colleague Kenny Vaughn actually opened up that conversation. He leads BreakLine Apex, and he was just kind of recognizing the moment that we're in as a country, as a community, particularly with respect to the recent news around the Breonna Taylor verdict. And you recently wrote a blog post about Quizlet's Be the Change initiative, and this was in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. I'd love for you to share more about this initiative with our BreakLine audience here.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising it. Obviously an important topic, a challenging topic. And so, at Quizlet, we pride ourselves on being a very diverse team, an inclusive environment. And we recognize that is the key to our success, given the diversity of the people we want to serve, right? We literally want to serve every person trying to learn around the globe. And so we need to be a diverse team and have a very inclusive environment. But as things unfolded with the racial unrest and the Black Lives Matter movement, we found ourselves internally saying, well, what more can we do, right? We need to do something in addition to the things that we're doing internally as a company. And so we, of course, did the normal things in terms of donations and things like that. But we said, well, what do we have unique that we can provide? And, fundamentally, I think that at the root of racism or any exclusionary kind of attitude or action is ignorance. And so I think that knowledge and learning is the antidote to that. And lo and behold, we have a very large learning platform that lots of, literally tens of millions of people around the world have access to. And so what we chose to do is we partnered with a number of leading, I'll say educational, organizations. So there's a great organization called Teaching Tolerance. We're working with NPR. We're working with a company called Newsella. And what we did was we basically said they have amazing primary source material about racism and anti-racism, about the history of racism in America and around the world, the history of and some of the root causes of segregation, et cetera. And so we worked with them to develop learning materials on Quizlet. So the study guides and the flashcards and all of the materials on Quizlet that pair with their primary source material, and then made that available, obviously for free, to anyone and everyone. And then we're actively, I'll say, marketing that, but trying to drive awareness of that to, to teachers who can bring that, who now have a ready-made set of materials that they can take into the classroom. Because these are difficult topics, right? And a lot of people who want to do something about it from an educational perspective, or even just educate themselves, it's difficult to know where to start. And so as a trusted brand in education and learning, we thought that that was something that we could do to provide those materials. And so we're really pleased with the success thus far, and just going to continue to invest in that. We're working with some additional partners to bring more content onto the platform, and then, like I said, drive awareness and make that available to everyone.
Thank you for that, Matt. And what I really appreciate about this is, our team welcomes the statements and welcomes the donations, and it's wonderful to see the support. What I fear is that some of that support is ephemeral. And so we really are looking for actions that stick and that are concrete and permanent. And that's what I really love about how you all responded to this as part of your Be the Change initiative.
Well, and you're spot on. If I can say, you're spot on that. And that was exactly what I said to our team, and we agreed on internally, is things will come and go, but this is a core issue that's been around for 400 years. We're not going to solve it in the next 4 days. And so having an ongoing and enduring commitment, we'll only know if our efforts have been successful over the next year, 2, 3, 4. But we're committed to continuing to drive for that change.
Good for you guys. I'm going to ask one more question, Matt, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions from our audience as well. You've had an amazing career. It's so much fun to look at that arc of your career and all these different products and services that you've contributed to, that you've built, that you've been a part of. And I think for some folks in the audience, it's easy to kind of look at that and say, maybe it was, preordained, and, you were just like on the path, and you're just one of those people, that gets struck by lightning. But of course there was friction along the way, and there were failures along the way, and you landed on your face along the way. Can you talk to us about those moments of resilience when you just had to bounce back? The stuff did not go your way, and you just hung in there and turned it around. Because many of us are in a moment like that, where we have to just be brave and go for it. And it can be hard to do that. So would love to hear from you about maybe some of those moments in your own career and how you handled them.
No, thank you for that question. This is interesting. For me, this is a challenging question, because on one hand, I consider myself so amazingly fortunate. I haven't faced the kind of adversity that a lot of people face in their lives. I've had a lot of support along the way. As I've grown in my career, I've had amazing people that have looked out for me and helped me take the next step, encouraged me, supported me, etc. So on one hand, I do feel just insanely fortunate and lucky, frankly. I think luck does play a big role. But, as you said, it's never, I think when you look back, it's easy to paint a rosy picture, and you can connect the dots very easily. But, it's always a backward looking view that allows you to do that. I'd say, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is kind of a funny one, which way back when, and I don't even recall the year, I remember at Google, when we were working on what used to be called the enterprise group, is probably now Google Cloud, I guess, is the evolution of that. And at the time, Google was primarily a search company, right? And so our products that we were building at Google were enterprise search products. Like, how do you take Google into a business and help them find stuff inside their company, right? And there was a strategy meeting where we presented our next period, I think it was next year's plan, and we were presenting that to Eric Schmidt and Larry and Sergey. And it was myself and a couple other folks on the team. And we presented the idea of taking Gmail at the time, which was a consumer app, into the business environment. We said, here at Google, we all use Gmail as like our company email system, and all the features that make Gmail amazing on the consumer side, they're 10 times more useful on the business side. Like, we should do this. We should purpose this product for business use, and we should take it into business. And they calmly sat and listened to our pitch. And Eric Schmidt very, very calmly and politely said, I think you should really focus on the search products. Like, you've got a good business there. I think you should, I don't think you should do this now. I think you should. And my colleague at the time, the guy who really deserves most of the credit for Google Apps, Rajan Sheth, I thought he was going to cry when we walked out of the room, because he had put a bunch of effort into this pitch. And literally the CEO of the company just said, no, we don't think that's a good idea right now. And luckily, the key part of that phrase was right now. And so as we didn't give up, we kept working on it kind of on the side in the background, as one is afforded the option to do at Google. And later on in the evolution, when we took it back, then it was the right time and we got support and we went and do that. But I think, you use the term resilience. It is resilience of not always taking no on face value. And, when a door gets closed, go crawl in through the window, sort of thing. The other thing I'd share is, and this is ongoing for me, just when I think I've got something figured out, everything changes and everything gets a lot harder. And so, there is a personal drive of I question myself all the time, right? I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. I wake up and go, God, I don't know. Like, am I the one that's really ready to lead this 250? Like, I figured out how to lead a 100-person company. Can I lead a 250-person billion-dollar? I don't know. And I think that's maybe more common than we all allow ourselves to believe. We look at the people, yourself, and the amazing things you've done, the people you interview, and we think, oh, they've just got it all figured out, and they're the special ones, and I'm over here kind of second guessing or questioning myself. And I have that just as much as probably any of you do. And luckily, again, I feel lucky that I have people around me that are supportive, that can champion me, that can help, kind of keep me uplifted and push me along to, but, a lot of times it's how do you overcome that, your own self-doubt that you may have at any given, because like I said, just when I think I've got it figured out, everything changes and the stakes go up another notch and the complexities go up. And then, that's the next challenge, right? That's the fun of it.
It reminds me, I mean, this has been ascribed to Brené Brown and others, but the definition of courage is not the lack of fear. It's going after something and doing something despite being afraid. And so I want to thank you for sharing that, Matt. It's comforting to know that even folks like you have to sort of push past that discomfort. Okay, Matt, so we've gotten a bunch of questions from our audience here. I want to turn it over to them.
Excellent.
And the first is from BreakLine alum Chris Perry, and he's actually a lead product manager at a tech company now after his Army career. And he says, what advice would you give to a young product manager or to a lead product manager, as the case may be, to have similar success to what you've experienced? Product manager to product manager, what would you recommend?
Chris, okay, Chris. So I think probably the best advice I ever got early on as I was learning what product management was, et cetera, with two things. One very tactical and one, in hindsight, very, very strategic. On the tactical side, the advice I got was always be the note taker. And what that translated into was literally be willing to take the notes, but sort of be willing to do anything, right? No job is sort of below you, because your job is to ultimately figure out what needs to be done to move that forward and go, and go do it, go make it happen. And so my shorthand for that is kind of always be the note taker, right? You think of like, oh, the most, sort of the most junior person in the room, they're the one that takes the notes from the meeting. I'm still oftentimes the one that's volunteering. I'm like, I'll take the notes on this one, right? So always be the note taker. And then on the other side, somebody told me very eloquently, Jonathan Rosenberg, who used to run product at Google for many years, all of product, said, understand that your job as a product manager is to inspire the team to go in the direction that they should go. right? So it's not to tell them what to do, et cetera, et cetera. Your job is really to inspire those people around you to go in the direction that you have conviction, you have heart, and you know that's the way they should go. But and actually, I use that as a model for leadership, right? A leader's job is to inspire the people around her or him to go in the direction that you want them to go. The last thing I'd say on product is the way you do all of those things is just stay ridiculously focused on the user. Like know what problem you're trying to solve and who you're trying to solve it for, and just have a relentless and maniacal focus on that. Because if you do that, everything else is generally going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Matt. This next question is from Isaac, and Isaac is actually an educator. He was on the faculty at West Point, where he won an award for his teaching excellence. And Isaac says, it feels like it's a growing problem on platforms with user-generated content where inevitably there's also harmful content. So misinformation, cheating, etc. How are you all handling that problem at Quizlet?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and definitely something that we are very aware of and are proactive to combat against, as well as I think the industry is getting better at it, but needs to continue to work together. I think this is one of those examples where the education industry, educational institutions, and the tech industry need to actually work together on this. On the harmful, kind of call it harmful, distasteful misinformation side, we have a number of both automated as well as manual ways to detect, content that shouldn't be on there. The biggest offenders in our world are usually the 5th grade boys, like think about it. But detecting that both through automated ways as well as through manual flagging. And then we have a whole process for tagging and taking that content down, et cetera. On the academic integrity side, we also proactively look for that. So we work with publishers and whatnot that they can give us test bank content. We actually built AI-based classifiers that look for content that looks like it could be cheating-based content. The challenge in that space is it's really less about the content and more about the intent of the user. So we actually have fun or interesting anecdote. We had a situation a number of years ago now where content, a teacher, a very well-intentioned teacher, took the test from like the textbook and uploaded it on Quizlet and gave it to her students as a practice test and said, hey, here's a great practice test that you can use to study for my test. And then she had written her own test. The problem was that was the practice test from a textbook that many other teachers and faculty were using. And so, to other students, that could be a vector for cheating. And so, I think the difficulty is it's less about the content itself and more about the intention of the user in using or leveraging that content. And so there's a number of things that we do, but I think it's an area where, as I said, the industry just needs to continue to work together to combat that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Matt. We have a question from Micah, who is a former submarine officer turned software engineer. And he's asking, do startups look for different qualities in engineer than a larger company like Google? Do you recommend one more than the other for a new software engineer?
That's a good question. I think, I can tell you what we look for. We obviously look for people who are qualified in the domain that they're working in. So if you're a software engineer, that you have the requisite qualifications. But what we try not to put too much stock in is, which school you happen to attend, because we have some amazingly talented people that taught themselves how to code, that didn't get a degree in it or didn't even complete college necessarily. We look for, past the baseline sort of technical qualifications. What we're really looking for and what we optimize on is a combination of both sharing our values and then, some of those, I'll say, less tangible things that we were talking about earlier, Bethany, of like, do you have persistence? Do you have grit? Do you have that tenacity? Are you one of my favorite areas to explore with candidates is, are you curious? Are you somebody who wants to figure out the next thing? Because if curiosity isn't something that you can teach in someone, it's just an innate quality. And somebody who's curious can learn anything. And so, those are the types of things we look for. That said, I think companies like Google and the other big tech companies are amazing. I have, a ton of former colleagues and friends that still work at Google. And I think you couldn't go wrong in terms of working at Google. And they also have amazing, it's a great place to grow in your career because there's so much support and professional development opportunities to kind of progress in your career and learn from some amazing folks around you. So I don't think either one is better or worse. I just think they're probably a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Matt. Okay, this next question is from our BreakLine maven, Jackie, who is a former opera singer, and she's also fluent in French, just FYI. And she's asking, what traits best prepared you to be a CEO? And is this a role that you aspired to? Did you start your career kind of tracking in that direction, or did it just kind of unfold organically?
It really just unfolded organically. I often joke that I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So, when I figure it out, I'll tell you. But no, as I sort of alluded to earlier, I think it's easy in hindsight I can tell you a compelling narrative about connecting the dots from my education to my first role and then how I made this move and which leads me to here. But that's a very backward looking narrative that takes the things that happen to have occurred and puts them in a nice sequence. I think the vast majority of us, of all people, really, there's a rare few who from an early time know exactly, I want to be a doctor, that's what I've always wanted to be, and then they go and do it. But I think a lot of us, we learn, we grow, we change, we evolve. I'd say the things that I feel have been formative to me. I've always enjoyed working with people. I've always enjoyed kind of motivating and trying to get a group of folks aligned towards what I wanted to make happen or have happen or go do. And so I think there was some natural alignment there. The product management job in some ways is a good, I'll say, training ground for that, because one of the realities of product management is you have lots of accountability and no authority. Like, none of the people that you need to be successful actually work for you, but it's sort of your job to help align them and get them all and create an environment where they can be successful, because that's how you're successful. And I actually think that's a reasonable microcosm of the CEO role. I mean, yes, in theory, everyone at Quizlet works for me, but if I'm making very many of the decisions on a day-to-day basis, then something isn't going right? Because I'm arguably, in most cases, the least qualified to make a decision in the company, right? The person that's working on that project, that's closest to that specific, feature or product or business decision or partner, they're significantly more qualified than I am, right? What I can bring is some perspective and some, as a friend of mine said recently, some scar tissue and experience to the table, but they have all the insights, information, and they're closest to the, to the end learner or to the end partner or whatever the case may be. So, a good day or a good week is when I don't actually make any decisions, because I've got an amazing team around me that is.
That's awesome. Matt, we have a question from Brandon, and I'm going to just paraphrase this question a little bit, because it reminds me a bit of a story I heard about the CEO of Zoom, right as the pandemic was hitting. And, whereas many businesses were getting clobbered in the hospitality space and travel and retail, Zoom was just taking off. And he was trying to really carefully balance the fact that this was an amazing moment on the business side for Zoom, without gouging customers and, sort of being kind of overly opportunistic. Similar in some ways for Quizlet, where like at home learning and learning on the go the environment that we're in right now, I can see that that would be an amazing opportunity on the business side. But how do you all balance the, you know, the where we are in this moment with also wanting to be respectful and a good partner to your educators and your learners who are using your platform?
Yeah, you know, I feel fortunate on this front in that, you know, the core kind of product capabilities that we offer are freely available and accessible. So our business model is, you know, much of our product is available for free, and we do have some advertising that helps support that for older users. We don't advertise to young kids, obviously. To support that. And then there are some premium, you know, some additional features that you can get if you subscribe and upgrade into some premium features. So in a lot of ways for us, we were in a unique position where that wasn't, you know, we didn't have really hard decisions to make. In fact, a number of my, you know, colleagues in what I would call more traditional ed tech, where they're taking, you know, they're selling products to schools, and they have a licensing model where schools buy their technology, you know, Zoom being a great example. If they have a paid product that they sell to businesses, and now schools are a big customer, they had to decide, do we make that product available for free, or do we, you know, or do we do it at a discount, or do we just keep it as paid and use it to grow? You know, in a lot of ways, I wasn't forced to make that decision because so much of our product is freely available to everyone. But I will say, I think it's caused us to be very introspective and say, you know, a challenging question is, so how do we continue to innovate and build new capabilities that we do think will really enhance and accelerate learning? And which one of those do we make available for free, and which ones of those do we put behind the paywall to build the business? And that's there's no perfect answer, candidly. It's a balancing act. You know, but like I said, we're in a good position that our business model lends itself to making that a fairly easy decision.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, of course, your investors in some senses are partners in this endeavor with you, and perhaps view themselves as supporters and enablers in the work that you and your team are doing. Can you talk to us about that thinking when you were making that decision? We spoke about Irv Grossbeck. One of his other maxims is that money comes with faces attached, and he means like there's no easy check, like there's no easy capital that comes your way. It's, you know, people sitting at your table engaging with you on a regular basis in terms of how you're going to build this business. How did you think about that, Matt, with this more recent fundraising round that you all did?
No, I think it's a great point, and it's so, you know, to me, I was in an advantageous position, or we as a Quizlet were in an advantageous position where we didn't have to raise the money, right? So if you're burning a lot of cash and you have 3 months of runway left or less, and you know, once that clock runs out, you can't cover payroll anymore, you don't have as many options necessarily in picking who you partner with, you know, there's another set of constraints, maybe is a better way to put it. We were in a fortunate position where we didn't have to raise the money. You know, it was opportunistic to raise money at the time, so that we could accelerate our growth and so that we could invest, you know, more in the business. But as a result of that, it allows us to be, you know, I'll say candidly, to be picky on who we want to work with. And so it was really important to me that we worked with, you know, people that were like-minded, that had a longer term horizon. You know, I have amazing investors around the table, and none of them are looking for a, you know, in and flip it 2 years later and get out and double your money. They all share a long-term perspective on the opportunity. They're all also very committed to the mission aspect of the business as well. Now, look, they're financial investors. They want to make they want to make money on it. But I joke that we talked about sort of stakeholder capitalism and the fact that it wasn't just about profit. At Quizlet, we talk about people, purpose, and profit, all three, because those are our stakeholders. Our people, our internal employees, and how we're building careers for them. Our purpose, which is ultimately our users, our, you know, the learners globally that we're trying to serve, And then obviously profit, we are looking to, make money from this endeavor, and we have investors, et cetera. But it's all of those stakeholders that are equally critical, not one, not one over the other. And so I'm really fortunate to have investors around the table that share that view and that are very aligned on that. But that's literally sort of the first line of discussion for me with, as we were, I've now done a couple rounds of fundraising, making sure that there's really strong alignment.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, as we come up to the top of the hour here, one last question, and this one is from Courtney Swaby, and she's asking about leadership. And you talked about this journey that you've been on, joining the company at 30 plus people, and then kind of wondering recently, am I the guy to lead a 250 person team? Is there one leadership lesson that's sort of crystallized for you in this journey that you've gone on over the last 4.5 years?
One, that's a tough
The pressure's
question.
on. The pressure's on.
I think it's a combination of, both having humility. So, knowing what I don't know. I'd say, if I reflect on my younger self a decade or more ago, I probably had more confidence in my convictions at the time. And what I've learned as I've had more experience and grown older is, I don't have all the right answers, and that's not my job. My job is to, assemble the group to get to the right answer. And no one individual is ever, the rare luminary. So I think there's a humility, a true humility that is critical. And then coupled with that, it's maybe cliched, but that growth mindset, that curiosity, that there's always more to learn. And, I've learned a tremendous amount about leadership and management. And, and I know that I've still got so much more to learn. So, the combination of that humility to know that you need to, and then that kind of curiosity and drive to go figure it out.
Well, Matt, what a pleasure to spend the last hour with you. This has been so much fun. It's such a delight to see great people doing great things in the world. And so I want to thank you for sharing the Quizlet journey with us. Thanks so much to the BreakLine community for joining. Great to see all of you, and hope you all have a great evening. Matt, thanks again for sharing.
Thank you so
Really
much, Bethany.
appreciate
It's
it.
really an honor. I appreciate it.